through decades of negligence, deception, and strategic erosion, what approaches is not a sudden catastrophe but a convergence, a culmination of forces that have long been in motion. This is not just about politics or the economy or the environment. It is about the soul of a nation, the fabric of a society, and the future of a people who have been led to believe they are free, even as the walls quietly close in. We must begin with an honest recognition the system has been rigged, not recently, not suddenly, but methodically, through policy, ideology, and silence. Power has concentrated in the hands of the few, while the many are distracted, divided, and demoralized. The illusion of democracy persists, but the substance has been hollowed out. Elections take place, yes, but real choices have grown narrower. The debates rage on, but the most urgent questions, those about class, empire, and justice, are buried under noise. This is not a condemnation of the American people, quite the opposite. It is an affirmation of their dignity, a call to awaken that latent power still resting in the hands of the many. Because what is coming will test every foundation, every institution, every assumption we hold about who we are and what we stand for. The cracks are already visible in the housing crisis, in student debt, in the militarized policing of impoverished communities, in the grotesque inequities of healthcare and education. These are not isolated failures. They are systemic symptoms. What looms on the horizon is not merely economic collapse or political unrest. Those may come, but they are byproducts. What's truly at stake is something deeper, an existential reckoning with the moral architecture of a nation. Can a society built on conquest, extraction, and domination transform itself into one rooted in equity, sustainability, and truth? That is the defining question of our era, and the answer will not come from those in power. It must come from below. The machinery of propaganda has long told Americans that they are exceptional. It's a seductive lie. It allows the nation to justify wars abroad, surveillance at home, and obscene levels of inequality as the natural order of things. But history has not been erased. The brutality of slavery, the dispossession of native peoples, the exploitation of immigrant labor, these are not distant shadows. They are living structures embedded in the present. The system has not moved past these injustices. It has evolved to accommodate them in more subtle and insidious forms, and now the bill is coming due. The climate is collapsing. The gap between rich and poor has become a chasm. The institutions once trusted to mediate conflict, courts, media, even education, have been weaponized or rendered impotent. In such a moment, despair is understandable, but it is not sufficient. Despair, while seductive, serves only to perpetuate the status quo. What is required now is clarity, courage, and commitment. Clarity to see the system for what it is, not as a series of unfortunate events, but as a design. This design prioritizes profit over people, consumption over consciousness, and domination over dialogue. The role of the citizen is reduced to that of a consumer or spectator. Meanwhile, the architects of empire and industry operate in shadows, largely unaccountable, insulated by wealth and legal privilege. Courage to speak the truth, especially when it's unpopular, to say that capitalism as we know it is unsustainable, that American foreign policy is, in many cases, imperialism by another name, that corporate media does not inform it pacifies, that the so-called middle-class dream is increasingly a myth, sustained only by debt and distraction. Truth, telling in such a climate is not merely brave, it is revolutionary and commitment to act, not only in protest but in creation. It is not enough to tear down, we must also build alternative economies, participatory politics, education that liberates rather than indoctrinates, communities grounded in solidarity, not suspicion. This is not a utopian fantasy, it is a necessity. because if we do not imagine and build another world, the one bearing down upon us will be shaped entirely by those who profit from our ignorance. Something serious is indeed about to hit America, but its impact depends not only on the crisis itself, but on our collective response. Will we continue to look away, hoping the storm will pass? Or will we rise, awkwardly, painfully, but decisively, to meet this moment with the full weight of our humanity? There is no savior coming from the top. History teaches this again and again. Real change has always come from the margins, from the poor, the organized, the defiant. It was never the senators who ended segregation, nor the CEO who stopped child labor. It was the people. It still is. Every right we cherish was born out of struggle, and every time we forget that, we grow more vulnerable to losing it all. America is not in the midst of a temporary disruption. It is standing on the edge of a profound systemic crisis, the kind that does not simply shake institutions, but challenges the very core of a nation's identity. This is not the result of a single decision or administration. It is the culmination of decades, generations of structural decay, moral evasion, and collective denial. The storm that approaches is not a natural disaster. It is man-made, it is political, economic, and deeply spiritual, and it has been allowed to gather strength while most were looking the other way. This crisis did not begin in the headlines of recent years. It did not start with a market crash, a pandemic, or a presidential scandal. Its roots go back much further, to trade deals that deindustrialized communities, to wars fought under false pretenses, to austerity measures that hollowed out public institutions, and to a media culture that replaced awareness with distraction. Layer by layer, the foundations of solidarity and justice were dismantled, replaced with individualism, consumerism, and fear. The economic structure, sold to the public as a pathway to prosperity, has in truth become a machine for upward wealth transfer. Workers are told to work harder while the wealth they create flows upward to the billionaire class. Entire communities are sacrificed for quarterly profits. Education becomes a commodity. Healthcare becomes a luxury. Housing becomes speculative capital, and the most basic human needs are auctioned off in the marketplace as if they were optional. Meanwhile, the political system, long celebrated as a beacon of democracy, now serves primarily to entrench power. The illusion of choice is maintained, but the spectrum of acceptable ideas has narrowed so dramatically that real dissent is either co-opted or silenced. Lobbyists write legislation, corporations fund campaigns, and the voices of ordinary people are drowned in the noise of polished rhetoric and hollow promises. It is not democracy when money rules and truth is optional, but the crisis extends beyond policy. It reaches into the very spirit of the nation. There is a spiritual impoverishment, a moral fatigue that cannot be measured by GDP or polls. A society that teaches competition over compassion, appearance over authenticity, and conquest over cooperation is one that is losing its soul. The wounds are not just economic, they are existential. People feel it in the anxiety that never leaves, in the isolation that haunts even crowded rooms, in the despair that numbs even the young. The system that dominates now thrives on disconnection. It wants citizens fragmented, suspicious of one another, too exhausted to organize and too distracted to think. It offers empty entertainment instead of knowledge, consumption instead of community, and survival instead of dignity. Yet beneath the surface, something ancient and powerful still stirs, the human hunger for meaning, for justice, for belonging. That hunger cannot be forever suppressed. To face this crisis honestly is to reject the soothing lies that have allowed it to grow. It means acknowledging that this is not a series of bad outcomes. It is the intended result of a structure built on profit, control, and exclusion. And while that may seem daunting, it is also liberating. Because once we see clearly, we are no longer bound by illusions, we are free to imagine and fight for another way of living. The crisis is real, but so is the possibility of renewal. And as we look deeper into the roots of this unraveling, we must begin to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we wish to leave behind? What are we willing to build in its place, and perhaps most urgently, what must we do together before it's too late? The answers to those questions begin to take shape as we examine the next dimension of this unfolding reality. Many still believe they live in a democracy because they can vote, speak freely, and criticize authority without immediate retribution. And yet, beneath these surface freedoms lies a sobering truth. The machinery of real decision-making, the levers of economic and political power, are tightly gripped by an elite minority. Elections are held. Speeches are given, debates are televised, but the outcomes that shape daily life, the distribution of wealth, the direction of foreign policy, the protection of corporate privilege remain remarkably consistent no matter which party is in power. This is not an accident, it is the architecture of illusion. The system survives by convincing people that they have influence while ensuring that their influence never threatens the core structure of power. Voters are given a choice between candidates pre-approved by donors and consultants, policies with overwhelming public support, like universal health care, debt relief, or climate action, are routinely shelved or diluted in service to lobbyists and shareholders. Participation has been reduced to periodic rituals, while the real business of governance happens behind closed doors. What was once the public square has become a corporate stage. The media, once imagined as the guardian of truth, has become largely a tool for distraction or division. Outrage replaces inquiry, sensationalism drowns out substance, and the people, fed on sound bites and spectacle, are left disoriented, angry, yes, but unsure of where to direct their anger. In such a climate, it becomes easier to blame one another than to question the system itself. This is by design. The true function of this illusion is not merely to mislead, it is to pacify. When people believe they are free, they are less likely to resist. When they think their voices matter, they are less inclined to organize. And when they see change as only possible through the next election cycle, they become trapped in cycles of hope and disappointment, never realizing that the real battleground lies far beyond the voting booth. It lies in the streets, in the schools, in the workplaces, and in the collective imagination of a people who are beginning to awaken. There is no shame in having believed the illusion. The deception has been powerful and pervasive. From childhood, we are taught a sanitized story about governance and freedom, one that omits the long history of suppression, resistance, and unfinished struggle. But there comes a moment when the veil begins to lift, when the